Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network. Groong, I'm Asbed Bedrossian, and I'm here with Hovik Manucharyan. This episode was recorded on October 26, 2023. In this Conversations on Groong episode, we'll be talking about the state of the Armenian media, freedom of the press, fake news, and the function they all serve in Armenian life. We'll also brush on the politics of Armenia, Artsakh, and some global conflicts. For this, we are joined by Aghasi Yenokyan, who is the former director of the Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty Azatutyun office in Yerevan. He is a research fellow at Columbia University in post-Soviet studies and a former lecturer at Yerevan State University. He has studied political theories at the University of Chicago, public policy at Arizona State University, and he is a graduate from the Yerevan State University's physics department. He has also earned an MBA from the AUA, the American University of Armenia. Mr. Yenokyan currently lives in San Jose, California. Hello and welcome, Mr. Yenokyan. Welcome to our show.
Hello, Aghasi. Thanks for joining.
Hello. Hello, friends.
Aghasi, you were the director of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. It's also known as RFERL, Azatutyun office in Armenia. Since this is your first time on our show, please tell us about yourself, your profession, your interests, anything you'd like to share with our audience.
I was graduated from as a physicist from the Yerevan State University. And then I got a second education from the AUA, from the American University of Armenia in MBA. Then I have the chance to study political science, actually international relations. I have the chance to be in the Harriman Institute in the Columbia University, then in the University of Chicago. So that I have 2-3 professions. But also I lead a couple of media outlets in Yerevan, and one of them was the Yerevan Bureau of Azatutyun of RFERL. I was the head of this office for 5 years.
So you were the office head from 2008 to 2013. During those years, you saw a period of significant political and social transformation. For the first time, you had a generation of adults that was born in independent Armenia.
Mm-hmm.
It was also a time of relative prosperity compared to the dark and cold days of 1990s. We also saw a peaceful transfer of power between Kocharyan and Sargsyan, as well as the events of March 1, 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at present, Azatutyun is the second most popular news and media outlet in the Armenian news space. While it's not officially part of the US government, it's funded by it, and it's essentially the voice of America. Can you describe its role in the Armenian information space for us?
Besides what you described these years, this was a very interesting year of the media transformation. New media were appearing at that time. Azatutyun, besides of being broadcasted by radio, it started to appear on the internet. Also, we started some video news, video streaming there. So it was really dynamic years. Azatutyun has very important role in Armenia because it brought to our country the new standards of media. It was kind of, in US way, in US standards, it was so-called objective, telling the objective news. And it is simply mechanically when you are speaking with 2 different parties, when you are presenting 2 different points of view, it more or less becoming objective. It's more or less not one-sided.
Mm-hmm.
This is very important role of Azatutyun, and it became the standard for media in Armenia that years. But now it was a little bit changed. And then, but during the time when Nikol came to the power, it was changed significantly. Because Azatutyun decided as his head at that time, told that this is his revolution. He becoming one of the voices of the present Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, and in this way, how people were understanding Azatutyun is a little bit changed.
Mm-hmm.
Now they didn't understand it as a as objective media, but a pro-governmental media. It's considered as a pro-governmental media. Moreover, it's considered as a voice of America, how America is supporting the prime minister. Well, I know that in politics, it's not the case.
Aghasi, I will give credit where it's due. Azatutyun or Radio Free Europe was a pioneer in terms of applying new technologies to media. And for instance, I myself got my Armenian news coverage in the late 90s and 2000s from the audio streaming that Azatutyun had at the time, and it was one of the few channels that provided audio streaming. But let's address the criticism which is there. And I think that over time, this criticism of perceived bias or maybe even outright bias increased. And it's multiple dimensions, right? There is the historical ties. We know that Azatutyun was, directly run by the CIA at one time. We know that it is getting its funding from the U.S. government. And actual editorial policies recently have been controversial. For instance, I would say anything after 2014, when talking about the Ukrainian conflict or talking about Russia, I would also cite the coverage of the 2018 regime change in Armenia. Azatutyun was there, with multiple streams broadcasting Nikol Pashinyan's regime change operation. And some would say Azatutyun helped greatly in terms of getting the word out. So how would you address someone bringing this criticism up to you?
Well, of course, I guess until 1974 or 75, Azatutyun was the part of the CIA. Directly was there. But now it has financing through the Congress by a separate line. And the influence of U.S. government was not so strict there. Of course, Azatutyun is raising a couple of issues, as you said, liberal issues that are not very popular in Armenia, and they are growing, they are rooting, starting from the Azatutyun's coverages. Of course, as you said, the international coverage, like the issues with the Ukraine or that type, many other issues, was also kind of very fresh voice in Armenia. It's true. But I will say that just now the internal laboratory, internal kitchen of Azatutyun, I will say that the US government does not have direct influence on the agenda that the radio here is opening up. We just have the Western methodology of media. And second, we are trying to bring fresh ideas. And we are, of course, as a media, we are trying to get bigger coverage. That's our main pillars that we were working here in Azatutyun.
Yeah. Well, I've always considered Azatutyun as a pro-US. A lot of people put a prism that is pro-Armenian or anti-Armenian, but I think that's the wrong prism. You should look at it as it talks from a perspective of pro-US interests. And since 2018, as the US has become more aligned with the government, its coverage is a little more pro-Armenian government as well. Yes. That's how I'm seeing this. Yeah. But I'd like to know, how was your relationship with the government of Armenia during your tenure? Because we know that President Sargsyan's administration did not love your appointment as the bureau chief. Why was that? Can you inform us a little bit about that?
Because they want to appoint their guy. Well, they tried to appoint instead of me another guy. So that's why they try to press on the RFRL president, or through the embassy here, through different other channels to change my appointment. And I have kind of a working relationship with the government. We have even at that time meeting when the president of Azatutyun of RFRL came to Armenia. We have even the meeting with the president, Sargsyan. So it's kind of, but the my boss was thinking at that time that he had to do whatever our Armenian government is saying. And when he had the chance to push me to resignation, he did.
Interesting history.
Well, but the funny part is that I learned about that after my resignation. I learned it from the WikiLeaks.
Yeah, that's story. Right. I read some of these things in the WikiLeaks reports. It'd be interesting to know who their guy was. Who did they want to appoint?
I guess, well, but it's a personal issue. Yeah. Let's not discuss it here.
Just to clarify, you left Azatutyun in 2013, and you were saying that was also essentially that the Armenian government got what it wanted. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, that's true. And after that, I will tell you that Azatutyun became kind of very pro-governmental, even at the Sarkisian time, and during the Nikol Pashinyan times, it is totally pro-governmental. While before that, the major advantage of Azatutyun is free coverage. Neither pro-governmental nor pro-opposition.
It's fortunate that we have you, and we don't have you too often. Let's dive in a little bit into the independence part of it, and just in general media, not Azatutyun. The USAID has from time to time allocated significant sums of support for Armenian media. We know that many media, especially those that have a solid source of funding, are getting that funding from foreign sources. For instance, a recent allocation in 2023 was for $17.5 million, and that was basically the size of the entire industry or advertising revenue for all channels in 2000. If we use 2016 numbers. In fact, I'm using your own study that you performed in 2016. During that time, for instance, as a source of reference, for the first 5 months of 2016, you pointed out that the revenue from all the media in Armenia was about 8.3 million in terms of advertising. So, Aghasi, how are such sums allocated or spent in support of Armenian media? When donors provide that money, what is their goal? Do you believe that money is distributed equitably, and who normally gets it? Where does it go?
I am not well aware about the numbers where this money goes, but I know that there are two major parts. One is just supporting a couple of media outlets here, and it is mainly the outlets that were started with the Western support, not only USAID but also Soros Foundation or whatever. And the second, this money goes to the so-called for advocacy of freedom of media. There are a lot of NGOs here that are working on that money. Unfortunately, we see that during the last years, the freedom of media reduced dramatically. We know even the cases of the arresting of journalists, arresting of bloggers. And as you said about the advertising money, now is the situation with the Armenian economy is not that good, and this advertising money is also going down. Well, from the other side, it's creating kind of the competitiveness of the media that is not supported by the government or other sources who has completely advertising support. They are going down by this reason.
If in 2016 the total market was 20 million, would you say right now it's less than that?
I think it's less. I don't have numbers. Sorry, but if I will know, I will work with the numbers. I think it's less. At least my friends from media, they said that they are not getting enough money from the advertising. Besides, the cost of media is becoming more now. So even with that money, it will be very difficult to survive. And the second part is, well, we see that the freedom media is going down, and this, well, they're just numerous, maybe about 100 agencies that were supported by this money. They are not doing anything good. They are not helping the media that is in need. So I will say that in this sense, the money allocated for media by USAID do not have big efficiency.
That was exactly my question. I wanted to find out if there are metrics, like after these funding allocations, is the media actually measurably better?
So the other problem is arising to measured media, because as I can see now, the major sources for news are Telegram channels here in Armenia. So I don't know if we have a methodology to count that, to compare that. So, or Facebook, social media is very important source of the information here.
Right.
I left this field like about 9 years ago. Well, 6 years ago, the advertising or the measurement of the effectiveness of media. I cannot say now for sure, but I will say that it's very difficult. It's very difficult now to count media. And then to see the effectiveness of the spending of advertising money or other money on media.
For the funding that actually goes directly to media, do you believe that it comes with strings attached, either implicit or explicit? For instance, does the funding come to say, you should cover only a certain issue? How much of the funding is really encourages independence and encourages independence of the editorial board instead of actually tying them down in terms of the features, in terms of the topics they should cover, and also maybe even ties them down in the way that they should cover it. For instance, could Factor TV, I don't want to pick on them specifically, even though they're a poster child, I think, for bad funding, but if Factor TV got some funding, how would the editorial board of one of these media then be compelled to cover it? Like, would they feel that they have complete independence, or would they feel that there's some kind of a string attached?
Well, I will tell you, for example, you bring the example of Factor TV. I will bring you two examples connected with this media. First of all, I was kind of very welcomed guest speaker on the Factor TV for the first period. But when they understand that I am not very supportive to Nikol Pashinyan, they stopped inviting me there. So even I asked them that I have something to say in your auditorium. They said, well, we don't like they stopped me inviting there. So this is one thing. I mean, this is the same thing that happened with all the media that is connected with Armenian government. They simply just stopped inviting me there. And the second thing is that I want to say that they are not strictly connected with the government. I see very often in their media, like that in Armenia, there are also terroristic organizations called Sasnazare that made a terroristic attack in the center of Yerevan or wherever. I see from time to time the members of this organization. And I told them, guys, you are a US-sponsored media. How you can invite the terrorists to your media? And they said, well, the US government still didn't recognize them as a terrorist. Well, they are very interesting for our auditorium or whatever. So I think this is the proof that they are not directly linked with the US policy.
If you take into the fact that recently Jirai Sefilyan went and met with several U.S. congressmen. That's very
interesting fact that I need to understand. I still didn't digest that,
Let's talk about another aspect of this. More funding translates to higher salaries, translates to special trips for the journalists overseas, special access to important people. So in a sense, there are a lot of perks attached to a journalist's job at one of these foreign funded media. And what I wanted to ask is, how does this disparity between funding, affect media bias? Do you feel that these journalists would then be compelled, even without explicit direction, to cover a specific topic from the perspective of their funding sources?
Even I will add one more factor. The good journalists are moving from other media to this kind of highly paid places, and this is also just worsening the situation in other media outlets. Of course, they will. How media is working. There is an editor who is giving what to cover, who is giving the task for that day or that week or whatever. And of course, the journalists have to do what they were said. So of course, it is affecting very, very strong.
Aghasi, nowadays, Armenia has a relatively new phenomenon to deal with, overtly fake news, without any attempt to hide behind a legitimate
Yes,
news company.
yes.
You've actually spoken in the past about fake news, but in the past few years, it's gotten infinitely worse. And with the technology that is coming online, the world we're going to
Mhm.
leave to our next generation is likely to be an order of magnitude more confusing. What are your thoughts on low quality outlets like Perfect TV and a throng of mostly fake news media sites bombarding the Armenian public?
This is a very interesting phenomena. I mean, at that time, I starting to work in media. There is just newspaper. You are printing it, and it's very difficult to influence, on the content of these newspapers, right? Well, now people are trying to use kind of what people like to hear. That's why they are starting to use this fake news. Even there is a interesting saying in Armenia. It's that when you are not following media, then you are not getting information. When you are starting to following media, then you are totally disinformed. You are under the pressure of the fake news when you are starting to. And it is for the recent years, it is very interesting phenomenon. Even you don't know where is the fact and where is the opinion. You don't know where is the news and where is the fake news. Even you don't know what is the real talks, real saying. For example, even the high. Well, let me tell you a couple of examples. During the 44-day war, the major news maker was the Artsakh, who actually even at that time, he didn't have a position connected with the news in the Ministry of Defense. But he was the leader of newsmaking. And the problem is that his opinion was considered as the official news, right?
That's right.
Yeah. But he is giving strictly fake news. After the end of the war, we all understand that this is fake. The other interesting problem is that his opinions or his interviews, his coverage was published not on the official site of Ministry of Defense or Armenian government or whatever, but was published on his own personal Facebook page. So this is, you see, is giving huge space for manipulations, huge space. But this is the reality that we have there. And I will tell you also another thing. Even the very high official, for example, Nicole Pashinyan, he was saying something that is in contradiction with his aide, his foreign minister is saying. So nobody understands what is Armenian official position.
And that happened in
what
the
is
United
fact.
Nations just a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it is very difficult to work with the facts. Yeah, I talked recently when I was here, I was speaking with the journalists. They said, we don't know how to do. We are working with the opinions. We are not working with the facts because there is no fact in reality.
Yeah. I'm also seriously concerned about the reliance of the government of Armenia on platforms like Facebook and Twitter, because that means that any one of these companies can almost shut down the government of Armenia.
Easily, yes, sure.
And for a long time, I was obsessively trying to understand where are all these fake news channels getting their funding from. Perfect TV. I thought, I thought for sure these must be like Azerbaijani funded channels. Except recently, for instance, we learned that one of the channels, actually they operate like a group of channels. I believe the last name is Sarukhanyan. It's a brother or sister. It's an entire family operation.
Yeah. I have heard about them.
Yeah. So, and the sister, was doing the voice recording while the brother was managing the channels, and they're getting millions of views. They're probably number one in terms of all the YouTube channels that produce Armenian content. And the prime minister's wife basically appointed this lady as her assistant. So then I said, okay, well, maybe it's not Azerbaijani funded, but these people must know each other, right? I mean, it's not possible for someone to have an anonymous channel with hundreds of millions of views or tens of millions of views. Do you believe that there's something that the Armenian government can do in terms of regulating this space? Why, for instance, was such a phenomenon not present and only appeared recently Do you believe it's because this government sort of, it suits the government, or do you believe that it's just a sign of the times? I guess I don't know. What are your thoughts? And can there be some regulation to influence this?
As far as I noticed here, it's the government is pushing fake news here because it's trying to hidden his real agenda. And fake news, of course, are helping them. And there is even, well, according to rumors, very strong rumors, even there is a fake news factory sponsored by the government. And they are getting their funding, of course, the ideas, the agendas from this fake news factory, which called information or something agency in the government. Well, I don't remember the name now.
Right.
So I will say that Armenian government is the major source for the fake news, major fake news creator.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's both amazing and
one more thing. You said why it is a recent phenomenon. So this is not only because the government wants that, but this agency. This was not a new thing that the agency existed only even during the Artsakh time. But at that time, the agency was working just to defend Azerbaijani news. They are working for Karabakh. They are working in the international area just to put their news there to deliver Armenia. But now they stopped this activity, and all the funding goes to creating fake news.
And let me be more specific here. I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the agency that you're talking about in Armenian is called the Հանրային կապերի եւ Տեղեկատվության կենտրոն. That would translate to Public Contact and Communication Center. In Armenian, it is a POAG, which is an acronym basically, which stands for Պետական ոչ առևտրային կազմակերպություն, or a public nonprofit. What's important is that you will frequently see references to it as the POAG. So when people in media refer to the POAG, this is the agency that they're referring to. And this is a big agency. It has subsidiaries. For instance, it has Orbeli Kentron, which is a think tank. And we've had experts from this think tank on our podcast before, talking about issues such as Georgia. But my subjective opinion is that you have to be careful, knowing that it is controlled by the Prime Minister's office, even though the Prime Minister's office will say that this think tank is objective and independent. But there's an allegation that this agency, the mother agency, is also involved in disinformation and misinformation. Is this the agency that you're talking about, Aghasi?
Yeah. That's exactly
Okay.
what I was trying to say. Mm-hmm.
So there are constant government attempts in Armenia, I would say, to attack freedom of press and journalism. Sometimes there are bills in parliament. They become law, or they cause a lot of noise and then go away. The most notorious example is when the Pashinyan administration tried to criminalize insults, something that Armenian government tried very hard to decriminalize back, I don't know, in the early 2000s.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But they actually reintroduced laws that would criminalize speech. But they had to, of course, undo that because they faced some pushback from the West.
Mm-hmm.
But still, the Armenia's freedom of press rankings in different indices, such as, Freedom House and so forth, they didn't suffer that much. And Pashinyan always tries to present himself as a proponent of free press. When he got elected, he said, in the history of the Third Republic, the press has never been freer than today. That's a direct quote from him. How would you really assess the state of the media today? Can you even compare it to, and if you were to compare it, how would you compare it with previous administrations in Armenia? Is press in Armenia free?
No. Press in Armenia is not free. Well, there are a couple of reasons. One of, as you said, there are strong pressure from the government, from different agencies on the journalists, on the editors of the news outlets that are trying to present the point that is not the same as the government is telling. So this is one thing, is the pressure. The second thing is money. Is money, because the advertising money government is trying to allocate in the way that he wants. For example, during the Artsakh time, there is no advertising on H1, on the major Armenian TV, right? And they opened back the advertising on H1, and since this is the kind of most popular TV in Armenia, it took the biggest part of the advertising to them, for them. And well, this is kind of many other topics. Kind of 2-3 years ago, I tried to organize the NGO for the freedom of press in Armenia. We worked for about 2 years here. It's called Media Advocate. I didn't get any support from the funds from the US government. I was talking with the embassy for a long time. I didn't get the support from Soros Foundation. Even I'm not talking about the money. There are a lot of issues that I raised, and I asked my former friends who were working in the area of the freedom of press. I asked them to join their voice to my concerns. They refused. They refused. They said this is not within their agenda. They are talking about the other things. And unfortunately, after the events, when the Hayastan Foundation, when the money of the Armenia Foundation was stolen here, my sponsors in US who were sponsoring me, they stopped it, and I have to cancel this job.
Right. So you're talking about the All Armenia Foundation?
Hayastan All Armenia Foundation. Yeah, you remember the issue in after the war. So after that, the diaspora people decided that they shouldn't send any money to Armenia for that reason, for that short period. I just remember. Well, at least my friends were sponsoring my activities. They decided to stop it. Yeah, that's it. You remember the Armenian government couldn't show how they spent about 100 million funds from this Hayastan Foundation.
Between 150 and 201.
Yeah.
It's a big, huge pet peeve of mine that there's still no auditing of that foundation.
No.
So, okay, well, I could go on for days about that, so I'm not going to touch that for the moment. Well, Aghasi, let's turn a little bit to politics. We're all aware of the changes that Pashinyan brought to Armenia in 2018. Were you supportive of the so-called Velvet Revolution, and what were your expectations of it?
Well, at the first period, 1-2 months, I was supportive to this idea because he has huge popularity. He raised huge masses, and I thought that he could make real changes. But when after that, I also came to Armenia, and I see the reality. Reality was it's just manipulations. Not just manipulations. And since the years were past, like 3-4 years, I see that whatever Pashinyan is doing, this is not from the interest of Armenians, from the interest of the Armenian government, Armenian state and the Armenian people. So I was really totally dissatisfied with his governing.
Right. At the time, in fact, you had predicted that first, he's going to address a large number of domestic issues, and then he was going to start initiating some kind of a foreign policy direction change. In many ways, you were right, obviously, but have the changes proceeded according to your expectations?
I couldn't imagine actually that he will destroy all Armenian ideas, all our dreams. I mean, I couldn't imagine that he could totally bury the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh. He went much beyond of my expectations. This is out of mind.
Absolutely.
But it's very interesting that at the time you had also said that he would try to change the geopolitical vector, and at least publicly we're seeing that happening now. At least there's some talk about that. Do you believe that he's trying to essentially change in reality the Armenia's geopolitical vector?
No,
you don't.
Well, now if we are talking about this with the kind of cold mind. We are talking about not what he is saying, but what he is doing. He is doing whatever Russia is needed to do in our region. He is working not in the interest of the Armenian people, but of the Russian government. So that was, when he was talking about the Western values, when he was talking about the change of the geopolitical preferences or whatever, it's kind of covering his real motivations. He is trying to show, well, yeah, I'm trying to do that, but I am under the pressure of Russia. But there are a lot of things that he can do for himself, and he didn't.
Yeah, I guess that's one argument, that when you've basically driven your country into the ground, anyone can take advantage of it. But I do want to remind that sort of if you look at the senior cadre that report to him, whether it's Arat Mirzoyan, whether it's Armen Grigoryan, they have a very strong reputation in the so-called civil society circles. They grew up in the Western-funded ecosystem. Many of them are pro-Westerners. For instance, Armenia had 5 defense ministers in 5 years. Armenia had 5 chiefs of general staff in the army in 5 years. Armenia had 5 heads of national security service. So all of the power agencies, all of the sources of power that would be truly perceived as sort of deep state or whatever, essentially agencies that would try to be conservative with Armenia's direction, they were all basically shattered to the ground. Meanwhile, the only appointee that I can think of that survived all this time is Armen Grigoryan of the National Security Council, and he's definitely pro-Western. So how can you reconcile that when you say that Armenia is doing everything that Putin or Russia wants, but at the same time he has all these people who are pro-Western, who obviously enjoy the support in the West? Because we also hear from my friends and who say, keep Lilith Makuns. Lilith Makuns is great. The U.S. State Department really loves her. And I imagine the same discussions happening about all of these other poster boys of Western support and girls. So how can you reconcile that when they're both supported by the West, but doing things that you claim are pro-Russian?
Well, this is like 2 different questions. First of all, as far as I know, the way, the methodology that Nikol Pashinyan is governing, he is not hearing much from his aides. And if the aides were moved out from their position, so the reason is that they are not doing the way as Pashinyan wants. So he doesn't want to hear any opinion that is against his opinion. So this is one
dissent.
Thing. Yeah. So this is one thing. If Armen Grigoryan could survive this long period, that means he understands this issue and he is presenting to his boss whatever he wants. So this is one thing. And the second thing, you told about the Makuns, you told about the other Armenian officials that have huge support personally in the West. But what is the result? What is the result? The result is that Russian forces enter to Karabakh, then they give Karabakh to Azerbaijan. So this is the end point, right? I mean, here I cannot speak even about other personalities. I can see only these 2 facts. Only these 2 facts that the Karabakh Armenians have forced to leave their homes to come to Armenia. That's
I think for a long time, I think for many Armenians, so what happened in Artsakh will raise a lot of questions in terms of, Russian support. But the Russians are saying, we never guaranteed that we're going to, fight for you in Artsakh.
No, they're lying. That's not true. It was whatever was written in this so-called document after the war.
The November statement.
November 3, yes, statement. Yeah. So they guaranteed that they are there. Then why they entered there? They entered there to guarantee the security of these people, security of the people, security of the corridor, or whatever.
Okay, let me ask you this. Let me ask it put it differently. Do you think that it was the inability of Russia to implement the November 9-10 statement, or do are you alluding that there is actually this was the goal from the beginning?
Well, I think from the beginning, there could be different goals. But at the end, when Russia started his war in Ukraine, they need a strong backup from the Turkey side. And you see that Turkey is supporting Russia in all issues. And Russia is just paying Turkey with the Armenian issues. That's my opinion. And because you see, from time to time, Turkey is raising some problems for Russia, and at that time, we see that there is some giving from the Russia in the Karabakh or in the Armenia. They are giving to Azeris some hills here, some territories here. They are closing the corridor. For example, when Turkey one more time started after the Erdogan's elections, when Turkey one more time started kind of more pro-Western politics, almost at the same time the blockade of Karabakh started.
It is obvious that major powers are negotiating and dealing with each other at Armenia's expense, but I think there can be a differentiation between whether something was intended or whether basically the state of Armenia was driven into such
disrepair
that it's easy for anyone to take care of their own issues at Armenia's expense, including Russia. But let's go to Artsakh, since we are talking about it. Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is that 100,000 and more people were forcibly evicted in 2 weeks time, and at the end of September. If you talk about pre-war population, another 40,000 were evicted from Artsakh when Hadrut and Shushi and some other regions were occupied. Given the current situation in Armenia with leaders of Artsakh, former leaders of Artsakh being in prison in Baku, with Samvel Shahramanyan being here, and there's obviously multiple groups trying to lead the Artsakhis here, and it's unclear for what reason. What are the best steps for Artsakh leadership now? What do you think should be prioritized? For instance, we're talking about right of their return. We're talking about maybe compensation. There's also the question of government in exile. Just in very high level, how should the Artsakh issue be managed? Do you see any solutions in the short term, mid-term, and long term?
I can see that there are some voices in the OS that, not very sound voices, that are still speaking about the Artsakh issue. But there are two major problems connected with that. First of all, that is that in Artsakh there is no more Armenians. This is the major tragic point that is not supportive for any talks about the Artsakh. And the second is that Armenian government is not supportive to this idea. They are trying just to wash their hands from the Artsakh issue, and they think that now they succeeded. And I'm not sure if they will raise in any international arena the Artsakh issue anymore. Besides, there are not real sound voices in Armenian political area as well. I mean, I'm not talking only about the government. I'm talking about the oppositional parties or whatever, who became during this period like very low profile political forces. There's no strong political force that could raise the issues. So, well, unfortunately, I'm not very optimistic about raising this problem, but who knows? I mean, the situation is changing very fast. Maybe there could be some opportunities, could raise some opportunities during the time.
Why would you say Pashinyan is not meeting with Artsakh government figures? We've heard Shahramanyan wanting to meet with Pashinyan, but, there hasn't been time apparently to do that.
Because he thinks that whatever he could do, he did with Artsakh. Mm-hmm. Now he do not want to deal with these issues. Yeah, he's done. That's why. Here I met with a couple of refugees from Artsakh. The situation is really bad, really bad. And the major problem for the moment is just to help these people for the winter time is coming. So besides, I know that there should be some money because everybody knows that we are supporting Artsakh government from the Armenian budget. So now this money could go to the this is just from the very first impression, right?
Right. There's also been international aid coming in.
Yeah. At least this money could go to these poor people, help them to survive during the winter, at least for the short term. So there are a lot of issues that should be done.
And there's enough money to buy a UK embassy for £17.5 million, or sponsor concerts, etc.
Yes.
Okay, so at this point, I think I'm just going to move and do a very quick couple of questions, Aghasi. I'm interested in your opinion. Earlier this month, there was a very significant crisis that flared up in Israel. Yes. And as you know, also, the war in Ukraine continues for a year and a half now. I wanted to ask a couple of questions about these things.
Yes.
What's your analysis of these things in the context of the geopolitical shifts in the world, going from a unipolar post-Soviet environment to a multipolar post-Soviet environment? And also how these things offer both opportunities and dangers to Armenia. Can you give us a couple of minutes on this?
Well, of course, I don't think that there is a change from the unipolar system to any kind of other system. Moreover, I think that the unipolar system is strengthening now. It's becoming more and more strong.
So you don't think that China and India are starting to roll into this and Euro?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. As about the Ukraine, well, we see, as I told you, that the Ukraine were affected in our situation very badly because Russia was paying to the loyalty of Turkey in the expense of Armenia. And I think that until the end of this war, the situation in our country will not change significantly. The problem is that we don't know what is the end of the war.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you see an end to this war?
Yeah, nobody is giving criteria for the end. Who is winning at this war? I think both sides are losing. Russia is losing. Well, obviously, it's his economy in crash. He is in international isolation. He cannot make big changes on the front in Ukraine, right? From the other side, he have significant territorial gains there. And many people are measuring the success and the victory in the terms of the territorial gains. And in this sense, of course, the victory of Ukraine is, I cannot see when it could be, or it could be. Well, so I think we should, for the end of this war, we should redefine the ideas of what is the victory. And only at that time we could understand how it could be finished.
How should Armenia navigate through this time?
Armenia, at least one thing is obvious. And interestingly, just recently, Nikol Pashinyan told about that Armenia have to diversify his security. His security guarantees, which is actually, well, for example, I just remember I read the document during the Artsakh time. He said that we have three pillars for our security. First is our army, second is our relationship with Russia, and third is our raising relationships with NATO. Now our army is destroyed, the diplomacy is destroyed with the West, so the only thing is Russia. And of course, Armenia should use these opportunities to create some diversification here.
So I find that interesting that you say that our relationship with the West is destroyed, so there's only Russia left, because a lot of people would say exactly the opposite, that we have destroyed our relationship with Russia completely, and we're turning towards the West.
Well, we destroyed relationships for the Russia as a partner, as a strategic partner. Armenia, well, if at that time Armenia was a strategic partner for Russia, now Armenia is a strategic exchange money for Russia. In this sense, yes, we change our relationship with Russia.
Okay.
So we see that there are like two very important threats. One, we see that the soft power is, even in the Ukraine war, the same. Soft power is becoming less and less important, which is very bad, which is just giving for any balance, or for making any balance, you should use your army, your force, which is like a global threat that the Palestinian situation is showing one more time. Second thing is that consolidation of Muslim world. We see connected with the
right.
This, and Armenia is just having like 80 or 85% of its borders with the Muslim world, and this could become a threat for us. But I can also see the opportunities. For example, we see that there is a kind of shift between the policy of Turkey and Azerbaijan connected with the Palestine-Israeli war, right? Because
yes.
Turkey is totally pro-Palestinian, and Azerbaijan was pro-Israeli. So if Armenia will have foreign policy, he could try to open up this gap, to work on this. So this is, for example, just one example. Or the second example, I guess yesterday Turkish officials starting to talk about U.S. base should be removed from the Turkey.
I read that as well.
Yeah. So, Armenia can raise his voice and said, yeah, we can, for example, U.S. can have a base in Armenia. Of course, it will not work. It will not work, but at least...
But from a PR perspective, certainly.
Yeah, at least we can start to think and to talk about this. This is what I'm saying about the diversification of the foreign policy, the diversification of security policy.
So tell us why you don't think it would work to have an American base, military base in Armenia.
I think, it will work, but not for now. Because we are under the strong pressure of Russian army, Russian politics, Russian everything. That's why. In perspective, of course, it could work. Yes?
So you yourself mentioned that we don't know the definition of victory. And there are a lot of voices that are advising caution. So when you don't know what will happen, is it a good idea to make such drastic changes to alienate Russia when, is it possible that Russia could, come out victorious after all, and therefore Armenia would be worse off? Why make such huge changes when even other governments in the region are having difficulty trying to orient themselves and trying to figure out, what to do and how to react to these, huge power changes? Wouldn't it be more prudent to try to keep balance or keep the status quo until we figure out how these global conflicts end?
Well, the problem is that we cannot talk about the balance. There is just Russia here. No balancing. And also there we see that, Russia is not interesting for protecting us. Russia is trying to sell everything that he could sell from the Armenian, interests. So that's why we cannot wait very long. This is happening right now. We should think about this right now. That's why.
And what do you think about the role of Iran in all of this? You said that Muslim world is consolidating, but obviously there is a competition between who should lead the Muslim world, and at least some Iranian policymakers. We spoke to a professor a few weeks ago from Iran, are saying that Iran would be able to protect Armenia's borders, and Armenia should ally itself closer to Iran and maybe follow Iran's lead in the region. Obviously, that assumes this multipolar world, which you don't agree with. But how should Armenia react to Iran's vying for power in the region?
Of course, Iran is trying to present himself as the leader of the Muslim world. And in fact, there are real base for that. Iran is very active in all Muslim developments. But we see all these changes in Karabakh. Every time we heard the voice of Iran, in every time, like instead of Armenian border forces came Azeris there to the Iran, to the border of Armenia and of Karabakh and Iran. We see that big changes in the Karabakh territory. We see that leaving Armenia's Karabakh, Iran always is sounding very important, very important voice. But we didn't see any real changes, any real effect to our foreign policy, to our security policy. That's
why. Yeah. Well, all right. I think this has been a very interesting conversation for me, and we could go on. So I hope that we will have you again for future conversations, Aghasi.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
That concludes this Conversations on Groong episode, and we hope you found it useful. As always, we invite your feedback. You can find us on most social media and podcast platforms or our website, groong.org. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube, like our pages, and follow us on social media. On behalf of everyone in this episode, we wish you a good week. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.